Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's extra special event, 20th anniversary celebration on the actual day 20 years ago when Victoria's marine national parks and marine sanctuaries were established. My name is Mark Rodrigue. I'm the Program Leader for Marine and Coasts at Parks Victoria, and it's my great pleasure to be hosting you this evening. We're going to be joined by a wonderful collection of our marine ranger staff who are going to join you in a moment just to say hello, and then a little bit later on we'll be hearing from them individually. Before we do commence though tonight's presentations, I just want to start by acknowledging traditional owners across Victoria, wherever you might be. In my own particular case, I'm speaking to you from Wadawurrung country down on the Bellarine Peninsula near Geelong. Hopefully we get a chance to hear from what other countries you might be from. One of the things that we've asked in the introduction is if you can all use the Q&A function to put your names in, just simply put your name in, and if you happen to know what traditional owner area that you're living on or where you are today, if you can just pop that in the Q&A section as well. Before we do commence though, I just want to start by introducing you to our wonderful guest this evening. First up, speaking to us live from Wilson's Promontory is Maggie Brown. Maggie, could you just say good day to everybody and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. As Mark said, I'm Maggie Brown. I work out of the Foster office in South Gippsland, and I'm a Marine Ranger, and I'm looking after the Wilson's Promontory Marine National Park, Marine Reserve, and also Corner Inlet, and Bunurong and Nyurumunga. So it's lovely to be with you all here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, Maggie, and yeah, great to have you coming in from South Gippsland live. Our other live presenter tonight is going to be the wonderful Mike Irvine. Some of you might have met Mike in some of our earlier webinars in the year. Mike, say good day to folks and tell us where you are, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. I work out of the Orbost office out in East Gippsland and look after Beware Reef Marine Sanctuary, Cape Howe Marine National Park and Point Hicks Marine National Park. So yeah, great to be joining you live tonight, and yeah, looking forward to the presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mike. That's just wonderful to have you here and have you joining us. We're also going to be joined tonight by a couple of other rangers. One from the amazing Marine Ranger Monique Bregman, who works out of our Queenscliff office. And you'll hear from Monique shortly. And the last thing we'll be finishing up with tonight in our presentations will be from our diving and monitoring officer, Tess Hoinville, with a great little clip that I think summarises beautifully what our 20th year anniversary is all about. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually start by just giving you a little bit of an introduction into what it is that we actually do in terms of the work here in Parks Victoria, and in particular some of the things that have happened actually over the last 20 years or so. So I'll just quickly turn my presentation mode on, and I'll try and get my little head up there as well. That should work, and hopefully what you should be seeing now is a screen which is basically just giving us our start of our slide presentation. I do think it's probably worth noting when we talk about the 20 years of Marine National Parks, and it was actually the 16th of November, the same day, 20 years ago when the parks were actually proclaimed. It did happen to be a Saturday, not a Wednesday, but that's, you know, that's how the weeks go. But a little bit earlier than the fact that the Marine National Parks were proclaimed, about 3 weeks earlier, Victoria actually adopted the two beautiful animal, or the animal that you can see in the screen at the moment, the screenshot there of the weedy sea dragons as our national, as our state emblem. This was a fantastic choice in many ways, I think, and I might have said this at some of our previous webinars. I mean, this is a species that's unique to Southern Australia. It's a beautiful animal, very much reflecting our underwater environments here in Victoria and Southern Australia generally. And it's also, as you can see, quite a fragile animal as well. And for me, it's very much a good metaphor for the fragility and the need to care for our marine environment. So happy birthday, weedy sea dragons, and happy birthday, Marine National Parks. If we then just start to think a little bit about what it is that makes these places so special. Victoria, as we've talked about in previous webinars, is a fantastic east-west aligned coastline facing southwards. But if we look at this view from space, we can quite clearly see the connections with the Pacific Ocean in the east and the Southern Ocean towards the western part of the state, and obviously the waters between here and Tasmania of Bass Strait. Our marine protected area system extends all the way from the New South Wales border at the Cape Howe Marine National Park, almost all the way through to the South Australian border in the Discovery Bay Marine National Park. And we'll have a look at a map of where those parks are to be in a moment or two. To take you back in time, though, I just wanted to just reflect on what happened prior to 2002. And again, for some of the people who might be listening tonight, or you might know of some people, there was a very long campaign to actually create marine national parks in Victoria. The gentleman you can see on the screen at the moment is Steve Bracks, the Premier of Victoria, receiving a whole bunch of petitions from the Victoria National Parks Association, the Marine and Coastal Network, and again, very much reflecting the attitudes and views of a lot of people in coastal communities that this should be something that the government should consider and actually introduce. Not too much longer after that period of time, the Premier basically did a reading of the legislation, the second reading of the legislation in the Parliament on the 5th of June 2002. It's worth noting that a year before, the legislation had been introduced, but it had actually not got through due to some compensation issues that hadn't quite been resolved at the time. But good marks from the point of view of the government. They persisted. What Steve talked about in the Hansard, these are direct quotes from Hansard, is that we introduced some world-leading legislation that to create basically a system of marine national parks and marine sanctuaries. These basically are something that Victorians can be particularly proud of. And I think some of the words that resonated most to me from Steve Bracks's comments were that this is not just done to protect marine parks for today's populations, it's being very much done for future generations. It's for our children, our children's children, and when they look back, they'll say that the decision made in the Parliament was historic and that it preserved 5% of Victoria's waterways as marine national parks and marine sanctuaries. So thank you very much to everybody who was involved back in the day in terms of the campaign itself. The campaign ultimately led to an Act of Parliament. The National Parks Act was amended in June 2002 to become the National Parks, Marine National Parks and Marine Sanctuaries Act 2002, which essentially provided the legal basis for declaring areas as protected areas, as no-take areas, and all of the other things that come along with that in terms of compliance, responsibilities, etc. But certainly a very, very pivotal moment, and what actually led to finally the proclamation of the parks. For the park system itself, the vision essentially was to create a world-class park system of marine national parks and sanctuaries, conserving our biodiversity, our extraordinary marine biodiversity, to be enjoyed, protected forever. And that's, again, very much where we are today. We're still continuing to work on that basis. These areas, as you will recall, hopefully know already, are no-take areas. It's basically a national park system that we've created for the underwater environment. And again, like our national parks on land, we respect the animals, plants, the habitats and the environments there, and basically allow natural processes to play out. It's probably also worth just remembering that there was actually some parties going on the 16th of November 2002. And I've just pulled a couple of screenshots of some videos that the VNPA have kindly provided to Parks Victoria some months back, just simply looking at what was happening at the time. And you may or may not recognise some of the faces in the shots at the moment. The first shot on the top left is actually down at the Bunurong Marine National Park, where some scuba divers apparently emerged from the water on the 16th of November and came up and started talking to the group of assembled students. Must have been quite an event to see that happen. Top right, you might recognise the woman there, probably best known for her adventures with sharks. That's the world famous Valerie Taylor. Valerie was a very strong advocate for our marine national parks in Victoria, and I first met her actually on the Queenscliff Beach, talking specifically about creating a park around the Port Phillip Heads area. Gentleman on the bottom left is an Englishman by the name of David Bellamy. Again, probably most famous in Australia for fruit commercials, but he's a well-known environmental advocate and a champion, and one of the people who basically came to Victoria to help advocate for our marine national parks system. On the bottom right, you might recognise her deepness. This is the incredible Dr. Sylvia Earle, one of my personal global heroes of the time. And Sylvia, David Suzuki as well, were invited to Victoria by the people in the middle, the gentleman in the middle, particularly Chris Smythe and his partner in crime, Tim Allen. as part of this campaign of getting Victorians engaged and thinking about what it might be to create a marine national park system for the future. So fantastic to see those people turn up on the day itself and be able to celebrate with Parks Victoria, and most importantly with Victorian communities, the fact that we've actually now established this particular park system. What does it look like today? In terms of the park system, we have 24 highly protected marine national parks and marine sanctuaries. We also have 6 other what we call multiple use marine national parks and sanctuaries. And these essentially are areas that you can do some limited forms of fishing. We're going to be talking specifically today about the Marine National Park System, which is, as I mentioned earlier, a no-take or basically leave things alone park system. They extend, as I mentioned earlier, from Cape Howe along the Gippsland coastline with the Point Hicks and 90 Mile Beach Marine National Park. Our biggest park, Wilson's Promontory Marine National Park, that we're going to hear from Maggie from in a moment, down there in the south. We've got a couple of parks in the sort of central Victorian coastline of Bunurong and the Point Addis Marine National Park over near Torquay. We've got the Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park, which we'll hear from Monique on in the video shortly. And then in the far west of the state, we've also got our 2 West Coast parks, the Discovery Bay Park, near South Australian border, and the big park around the 12 Apostles, the 12 Apostles Marine National Park. There's also a couple of smaller marine national parks in Western Port itself with Yoringa, French Island and Churchill Marine National Park. And there's a very small park, Marine National Park, also in the Corner Inlet area. We're going to now hand over to Maggie to tell us a little bit about the beautiful Wilson's Promontory Marine National Park. So I'm going to stop sharing, Maggie. If you can just start to queue up your presentation, mate. I'm going to switch over to your camera. And then hopefully we'll be able to get your head and your presentation up on the screen sometime soon.
Thank you, Mike. I'll just share that with you all.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. I think that should be working now.
That's working beautifully. And
excellent.
I just need to change heads now. I need to get your head up there, not mine. There we go. That's better. All right, off we go.
Excellent. Well, thank you and welcome everyone. It's a really special occasion today, being the 20 years of our fantastic marine park network in Victoria. I've been reflecting on the significance of these parks being declared 20 years ago and how this has really shaped the Victorian landscape when it comes to marine protected areas, and also how we've been able to continue to grow that engagement with the public and really bring them along in the journey of protecting these special places. So, as we said earlier, I have the pleasure of working at the Wilson's Promontory Marine National Park. That's one of the marine national parks that I get to help manage throughout my work time. So the Wilson's Prom Marine National Park is actually the Victoria's largest MPA that we have in the network. As you can see by this map, there we go. As you can see by this map, it extends from the bottom of the Wilson's Promontory Terrestrial National Park down into the waters of Bass Strait. So this entire area is set aside to protect a range of ecological communities of both flora and fauna, and this also includes some threatened marine mammals and threatened shorebird species that are a great focus for us here in the local area. So the Wilson's Promontory Marine National Park actually encompasses a total area of just over 16,000 hectares of marine environment, which is very incredible. In this environment, we have a number of really significant habitats that we're involved in monitoring throughout our work. These include subtidal reefs, both shallow and deep subtidal reefs. We have intertidal rocky shores, our beautiful sandy beaches, which are a site that I guess most of the community get to interact with these parks on. We also have very important seagrass communities and subtidal soft sediments. And then also our areas of deeper water where we get a lot of pelagic species. So one of the most interesting things that I personally find about this particular park is because of its geographical location, it's influenced by both the warmer waters of the Eastern Australian, the Pacific, but then also the Western waters coming up from Bass Strait. So what this means is it's a real point of difference between the species that we see. We get those species that are more adapted to cold water from the western side of the state, and those that are adapted more so to the warmer waters of the eastern side. And Wilson's Prime actually acts as their western point and eastern point of range. So generally we won't find them any further east, and we generally won't find them any further west. So what that means is that for us monitoring these areas is that we get a really extraordinary mix of these species that you wouldn't necessarily see anywhere else in Victoria. Which is just, yeah, it's a fun fact, and I find that a really special part of the Wilson's Prime Marine National Park. So as part of my role here as a Marine Ranger and the other Marine Rangers in the area, we conduct what's called rapid health assessments. We do this via snorkeling and scuba diving, as you can see by this picture. And what this allows us to do is to go to various locations within the park and conduct assessments to determine the different markers of what we would classify as health or resilience within these areas. Things like macroalgae, microinvertebrates, fish species, whether there's any pollution or any signs of illegal activity, and then that gives us a score or a result, and then we can determine how well that system's coping, whether it's a healthy system, whether things need to be monitored more closely into the future. It gives us a really good gauge of that health of that system. We also conduct marine monitoring in these various areas throughout the park. We monitor for both invasive species like the crown of thorns starfish and also the overabundant native species, which also need to be monitored to make sure that they're not increasing their range too greatly and outcompeting other native species. So just to touch on some of the challenges that we do face in our marine national parks, not just in our local ones, but I think these are globally recognised challenges that a lot of parks are facing. We obviously have probably the big one, which is climate change and all of the impacts that come along with that. We are very lucky, I guess, that we're able to monitor these species so closely, and therefore can determine if any changes are occurring and be able to hopefully put in place some planning for those changes, and we have a really good first-hand view as to any changes that are occurring from that. Also, an impact that we focus very heavily on is illegal fishing and harvesting in our marine national park systems. The knowledge from the community over the impacts of taking from these areas has grown substantially over the last 20 years, and it's been it's really positive sign that people are starting to understand the importance of these areas and why they're designated as no take. The other challenge, I think, moving forward will be to continually educate the community of the importance of these areas. We want to keep that passion alive amongst the community that Mark showed earlier on those slides when people were championing the installation of these parks, and we want that to stay really conscious within the public's minds, that they can continue to support and strengthen these parks going forward. So one of the things we were speaking about coming up to this 20-year reunion is some of the changes that have occurred in the past 20 years. As I've already touched on it, I think the recognition, the understanding, and the education with the public around the reasons why these parks are being installed and their importance has really grown. And I think certainly in our area, there's a really positive mindset, and people think they can see the benefits and really appreciate the facts that the parks are in place and what they're achieving. We've also seen some quite significant technological advances, which have made the work that we do through our research and monitoring really incredible, simply down to the amazing photographs that we can now get and use those to document the species that we have. We have remote vehicle technology now. We have mapping software that's allowing us to map different areas of seagrass. All these things are really letting us determine the health of these systems on a much finer scale, which is excellent moving forward. And I think another one of these changes is just the simple fact that we have dedicated resources and staff now throughout the state that can have the marine environment and our marine national parks as a focus, and we can tailor our programs to be able to meet the needs of these really dynamic systems. So I think they've been really positive. So that's almost all from me. Here's a last photo of our incredible Skull Rock on the southern tip of our Marine National Park at Wilson's Promontory. Congratulations to everyone involved, and really exciting to celebrate this milestone with everyone.
Wonderful, Maggie. Thank you so much for those very thoughtful comments and reflections on what it does actually mean. You're absolutely right when you talk about the fact that the majority of Victorians are actually now, I think, quite proud, and rightly proud, of their Marine National Park system. In some survey work that Parks Victoria undertook last year, we actually found that more than 86% of Victorians actually are very strongly supportive of our Marine National Park system. What I'm going to do now is, as I mentioned earlier on, so great stuff, Maggie. We'll come back to you shortly, and we've got no doubt have a lot of questions to ask you in a moment. Now, what I need to do now, though, is to get our next little component up onto the slideshow. So let's see how we go there. This is a short little video. One of our marine rangers, Monique Bregman, who was going to present for us tonight, as I mentioned, we did have some things that unfortunately got blown out of the water by the current weather we're having this week. But Monique was very kind, went out into the Marine National Park and actually put this little video recording for us together. So I'm going to share that with you now, and hopefully it all comes. Whoops! I'll just stop that again. And apologies about my technical challenges on this front. Just got to remember to keep the sound on this one, otherwise you're not going to hear very much. And let's try that again. All right, hopefully this is now going to be running for you. Let's go, Monique.
Good evening and welcome to Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park. We're currently at Pope's Iron. Pope's Iron makes up the smallest segment of Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park. But this little site here was actually protected in 1979 as a sanctuary. And the reason it gained a level of protection is because divers that were diving here were noticing just how profound the biodiversity of fish life was, and felt that there needed to be a level of protection to keep it safe. It's since then, in 2002, been incorporated into the larger Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park network. And that actually gives it a higher level of protection. So Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park means there's no fishing, no harvesting, no dredging, no development. But above all, it gets an increased level of monitoring and observing, which gives it a level of protection and nurture that other areas tend to miss out on. Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park is made up of such an array of habitats, hence the reason it's been made up of this fragmented puzzle piece design. The reason for this puzzle piece design is because we've got such a variety of habitats just down here in the southern end of Port Phillip Bay. From the seagrass meadows found at Swan Bay to Mud Islands behind us, we've also got amazing rocky reef and algal forests that exist at Point Nepean and Point Lonsdale. And of course we've got Pope's Eye and one of the deepest parts of the Bay, Portsea Hole, which is part of that Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park. And throughout all of these fragmented sections, I've the most beautiful blue throat rice, which never fails to pop his head out and give me a toothy grin whenever I go past. I can be guaranteed if I look under the ledge at Point McKean, I'm bound to see Port Jackson sharks as well. And whenever we dive Portsea Hole, there's one distinct crevice which has got 2 bearded cod in there, and they're all happy to say hi as well. So I guess for me, getting into the park and seeing the longevity of some of the individuals you recognise, it's really comforting to know that that level of protection allowing them to get old and have a longer period of reproduction time to help maintain the biodiversity. So by having the Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park, it's actually enabled us to put a spotlight on certain areas of the waters that we manage. And by having that spotlight on that, we're really monitoring and getting in all the time and getting a much bigger picture of the species interactions that take place within the ecosystem, the actual species that are there, and how they're actually developing, changing, and perhaps trying to adapt to the changes that they're having to face. We have noticed that species within the protected area where fishing has halted, they're larger, they're more abundant, they're more diverse, and that's going to help spill over into the non-protected areas. So by having this future-proofed mini zone within the southern end of Port Phillip Bay, we're actually future-proofing the areas outside the park as well. We also, having that 20-year snapshot through all that monitoring, we've started to see some decline in the marine protected area. We're also still regularly seeing people illegally fishing and harvesting within the marine park, and that's part of our management as well. But it's such a great place for you guys to come in and come and meet some of your scaly bird friends. You start to get to know them on a different level. You're going to start to get to know what they need in their habitat, and also how our actions on land are actually affecting their habitat as well. Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park is so accessible to everyone. Pope-Si is just a short boat trip from Queenscliff, as is Mud Islands, and you can also access Point McKean and Point Lonsdale to the beach. So don your dive gear or don your snorkel gear, get your heads under the water and have a look at this absolutely magical place. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm so looking forward to seeing you guys down here over summer so you can get into one of your marine protected spaces, get your kids involved, and that's why we are future-proofing these areas so that your children and their children can benefit as well. And if you come now, you're going to be able to see some of the gorgeous baby gannets that have just hatched behind me. Thanks for listening.
Mute. There's a faux pas. Didn't turn my microphone back on again. Thanks very much, particularly to Monique Bregman and also to cameraman Jack Dowson, our two of our marine rangers based in our Queenscliff office. Monique, as you can see, is sitting out there. You might notice she's got slightly wet hair. She'd actually just been doing one of the rapid health assessment surveys that Maggie was talking about a moment ago. So great work there. And you can also see in the background the fact that we've actually got the magnificent area around Pope-Si. Pope-Si was actually one of the first marine protected areas, as Mon mentioned, that was established back in the late 1970s. It was a place that basically became really important for scuba diving, and it actually ended up basically becoming a fully protected area, and eventually it ended up in the Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park. And I think everybody who lives in Victoria, certainly everyone who lives around Port Phillip Bay, should at some stage in their life get the opportunity to go under the water, preferably with Mon, but maybe not, but certainly get a chance to see what a highly protected area that's been in place now for just on 50 years actually looks like. So fantastic effort there. We're going to take our journey now back over into the live space and going to rejoin Mike Irvine over in Orbost with a little bit of discussion about Beware Reef. So handing over to you now, Mike. And just let me know when you need the slides advanced, please.
No worries. Well, we might as well click to the first one. Thanks, Mark. So thanks for the introduction. I actually started my career with parks 20 years ago, which isn't a coincidence. 20 years ago, when all the marine protected areas were created, Parks Victoria put on quite a few new ranger positions to help look after those parks and reserves. So I was really lucky to be one of those, and started my parks career at Orbost, looking after not only the marine park but for terrestrial parks as well. It's an amazing place, East Gippsland, and if anyone ever gets a chance to come out this way, if you haven't been already, please come out and check out these places. So Beware Reef, you can see in this slide, There's a little bit of it that sticks out of the water. That bit of rock's about 70 metres long and 20 metres across. See a couple of boats anchored off the reef there down the bottom of the shot. The reef actually extends out about 1 kilometre underwater and comes up in a series of bommies and eventually peters out to the southeast. It's about 4 kilometres offshore, so I think it's our only marine protected area that's actually not joined to the shore. It's isolated. It's only 220 hectares. As Maggie was talking about before, with the prom, Beware Reef's one of the first places where the warm water from the East Australian current mixes with the colder water coming up from the Southern Ocean and Bass Strait. So we get all sorts of residents there and visitors from tropical waters sometimes as well, tropical sea snakes and all sorts of fish and other species that pop in to say good day sometimes. We'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Mark. I still vividly remember the first time I dived at Beware Reef. So that exposed bit of rock that juts above the surface drops down to about 30 metres to a sandy bottom, and the drop-offs are just vertical walls, gullies, canyons, a real mix of all sorts of landscapes, and covered in sponges and corals. It's probably the most the vivid thing I remember is just the multiple colours and like this artificial world of sponges and ascidians and corals all crammed in together. But like this crazy garden has just gone berserk and put way too much stuff in there, but it looks amazing. You can actually see part of one of the shipwrecks there in the background too. I'll talk about them a little bit more in a moment. Go to the next slide. Thanks, Mark. Beware Reef Marine Sanctuary is a real volunteer-focused sanctuary. So when it was created, John Arians, who's pictured there, he had a fair bit to do with putting the spotlight on Beware Reef. He's a really avid photographer and a really good photographer, and had been diving out there for many, many years with a good mate of his, Don Love, and also Al Wilkins. So that the three of them made up what's called the Friends of Beware Reef group. And they've just done a power of work, not only to promote the area and help it become a marine sanctuary when they were created, but the work they've continued over the last 20 years has just been phenomenal. Go to the next slide there. Thanks, Mark. So John was the photography specialist, and even as recently as a few years ago, he's over 70 now, carting around the video camera and capturing amazing footage, which is used to help promote Beware Reef Marine Sanctuary and other areas. And Don Love, he's the shipwreck specialist. So you can see Don there in the foreground with part of the Auckland, SS Auckland, which sank there in the late 1800s. But behind Don's written many books on the shipwrecks in right across Victoria and other parts of Australia. And he knows that the three wrecks out at Beware Reef backwards. So to be diving with this guru on shipwrecks and a passionate, amazing underwater photographer like John, I was really lucky. So they taught me a hell of a lot about this park. They taught me way more than I've ever been able to teach them about that area and the underwater environment there. I'll go to the next shot. Thanks. So the first few years I was, Mike, here's your marine sanctuary, and you've got a couple of other marine national parks up the road, Point Hicks and Cape Howe, but we haven't got a boat for you yet. So this was a few years later when we finally got our boat Diodon, and we could actually go out ourselves and not have to rely on the volunteers boat. So before that, I'd be begging and pleading with Don and John and Al to be able to jump in their boat and take us out and do all this great work that the volunteers were doing out there in terms of surveys and photos and video and everything else. But finally got the red shiny boat. That was quite a few years ago. My hair's a little bit browner there than it is these days, but and got the old park shirt on. We've changed colours now to the teal colour. You can go to the next one. Thanks, Mark. A highlight, as well as the shipwrecks and the corals and the sponges and just the amazing fish out there at Beware Reef, that the seals are definitely a highlight. So whether we're doing underwater surveys or urchin culling work, or taking video and photos to make up diver guides and posters and bring the amazing footage and images back. So people who aren't lucky enough to come back or to go in the water and scuba dive can experience it and see what it's like out there. Whatever you're doing out there underwater, the seals always come and check you out. So, you know, we have them tugging on measuring tapes we're using to try and do transection. Next thing that your tape will be taken off and you look over your shoulder and there's a, well, like on the background here, and there's a seal tugging on your tape or trying to photobomb your shots or your videos. So it's pretty amazing. The next one, thanks, Mark. The guys, so Don, John and Elle and myself started to get really interested in, you know, what the bottom looks like. And although there were some areas that they knew back to front, common areas that dive, particularly on the wrecks, there was still a fair bit of Beware Reef, which was sort of undiscovered, might have been dived on every now and again, but not focused on. So we started to get into some high-tech stuff. So that's a prototype of our tow fish. So it's got a transducer on that, and we tow that little torpedo behind the boat and record on a side imaging sonar on the screen there. We can flick to the next shot, Mark. So this isn't a sonar shot, but it's a LiDAR shot. But building up between the sonar and LiDAR images, that's what the reef looks like underwater, with that dark orange, dark patch on the left being the above ground bit, or sorry, above water bit, and the rest of the reef peters out. So we were starting to build up a really good image of what the place looked like and how vast it was underwater. So only a kilometre on land is not much, but underwater it's a long way and a lot of terrain to cover. Go to the next one, thanks, Mark. As I mentioned before, that we got a lot of images and videos through the friends group, through the volunteers, and prepared diving guides and ID booklets and posters that we'd hand out to schools and kids and adults and the whole lot. Next one, thanks, Mark. Marine pests, and Maggie mentioned that with Wilson's Prom as well. So marine pests are something that without volunteer groups out there regularly diving, we can miss and or lose track of how they're developing and going over time. So this is a New Zealand sea star that Don Love discovered out at Beware Reef a few years ago now. So it's not a native species. Luckily, they don't breed up and take over the place, or they haven't so far. But something we keep an eye on, and yeah, the friends group were the first ones to identify that out on the site and remove any that they come across. Next one, thanks, Mark. A project that I've spoken about on webinars like this before, and one that's been a real key part of the volunteer effort, and also Deakin Uni, Melbourne Uni, Parks Victoria and others. A real group effort has been managing urchins out at Beware Reef. So they're a native species, but they're overabundant and create these big barren areas. So with volunteers and contractors and staff, we've managed to reduce the number of urchins out at Beware Reef. So what you see in that shot's one of the earlier visits that we did, and starting monitoring and culling of the urchins. If you were to look at that same area now, it would be completely covered in kelp, and that's only like 2 years after we started doing it. So the kelp does come back pretty fast, but we do have to maintain the effort to keep the urchin numbers down. Another recent addition we've got out there are some moorings. So we've had some moorings installed recently out at Beware Reef to help with our research monitoring, and also for recreational divers to go out and enjoy the place. It is a tricky spot to dive unless you know it, but being able to tie up to a mooring out there definitely makes it easier. So Beware Reef's completely a no-take zone, but we do encourage people to go out there and dive and enjoy it. And I couldn't finish a spiel on Beware Reef without telling just a little story that Don, John and Elle are really dedicated and really focused, but one day I couldn't go out with them. Don and John came back in to the office babbling and rambling and just carrying on. I couldn't even understand what they were saying, and eventually they said, oh, we're doing this survey dive, and down on the bottom, and then all the fish disappeared and the seals went up on the rock, and they were sticking their head underwater looking at us. And we were wondering what was going on. Next thing, this great white has started circling them, and it did about 3 laps, I think, before John realised he had his camera, and this is one of the photos that he took on the old Nikonos camera. So it's a few years ago now, and they stayed down there and finished their survey dive, and came up about 20 minutes later. The shark had gone, and the fish had appeared again, and they were laughing and talking about at the back of the boat, and then thought we better jump back in the boat just in case he comes back again. So look, that's about it. The marine protected areas, especially out East Gippsland Way, are really special to me and many other people. So congratulations to everyone involved in getting them up and setting them aside as protected, and everyone that's helped out over the last 20 years to help manage and protect them. So thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. It's great to hear the stories, and particularly your reflections on how important community groups have been in the story of Beware Reef Marine Sanctuary. You know, our community champions, whether in the eastern parts or the western part of Victoria. I was down with some people at Point Addis the other day, a whole bunch of groups celebrating 20 years down at Ricketts Point on last Saturday. The groups at Jawbone are celebrating 20 years coming up this coming Friday. So there's really quite an extraordinary collective of people who actually contribute to and make Victoria's marine protected areas what they are today. So we're very, very fortunate in the fact that we've actually got these special places in the sea that we can actually use and protect. I'm going to now again try and share some video with you. This last little piece before we get into the Q&A is very much about trying to give a bit of an overview of just what has been achieved over the 20 years in the Victorian Marine Protected Area System. The person who's narrating and obviously featuring in the video is actually our Marine Diving and Monitoring Officer, Tess Hoinville. Tess, again, will be actually next month's webinar presenter, so looking forward to Tess joining us then. But what I thought I'd do now is just share this video with you and then look forward to some questions as we get closer to our finishing time. I've just realised I haven't left you with some sound, so I need to start all that again. Just bear with me for a moment while I get my technical things sorted. Include computer sound, that would be useful. Yes, do that, add that, click that, send that live, and let's go.
A couple of decades ago, it was pretty radical to say we're going to make part of the ocean a national park. But in 2002, Victoria made history by doing just that. 13 highly protected marine national parks and 11 marine sanctuaries were created across Victoria's magnificent coastline. It was such a huge achievement. The southern coastline is home to more than 12,000 marine animals and plants, and some of the most unique and diverse habitats in the world. 20 years since they were created, our marine national parks continue to safeguard healthy ecosystems from overfishing and marine pests. I feel so lucky to be part of this work. Aboriginal people have lived across Victoria for thousands of years. Stories from traditional owners continue to pass on knowledge about using and caring for these special places. These stories describe sustainably managed systems according to traditional laws and customs. The marine national parks in Victoria are protecting a huge range of ecosystems, from the water column to seagrass meadows and sponge gardens. They're just like your national parks on the land, so everything in them is protected, from the rocks to the shells to the fish that swim within them. They're protecting everything we know, but also everything we don't know. These no-take zones are really important because everything has a purpose in nature. Something like a shell, which although it might look nice on your shelf, could be the home of a hermit crab in the future. More than 650 species of fish are found in Victoria, and over 70% of these fish are unique to southern Australian waters, meaning they're not found anywhere else on Earth. Our ocean is a huge system filled with many supporting ecosystems. Healthy marine ecosystems and biodiversity are vital for our planet and help to clean water, absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, as well as make food that many people rely on. The systems are connected in a way we can't fully predict. We don't know how losing a species could could adversely impact the entire ecosystem. Protected areas like Victoria's Marine National Park system promote diversity by creating refuges for marine life that help to increase species abundance and protect areas from habitat loss. A healthy system is a resilient system. The marine national parks and sanctuaries don't just protect their ecological values, but also social values. It allows us to get out and recreate, whether that's scuba diving, snorkeling, kayaking. These are such special places, and whether you're on the surface or below the water, they're protected for us to enjoy. The work that we do is pretty fantastic. We get to get in the water, do regular monitoring programs to make sure that we understand what's happening in our parks. This has enabled us to track the effectiveness of protection for many key species. We've reduced the risk of marine pests through engaging stakeholders in the Check Clean Dry campaign. Although Parks Victoria is the governing body, there are so many more pieces of the puzzle in management of marine national parks and sanctuaries. We partner with government, researchers, agencies, community partners and volunteers to better manage these vast blue spaces. One of our most important achievements is that we've created detailed habitat mapping for all of our 24 marine national parks and sanctuaries. We've recorded new habitats that weren't first known to science and significant improvements in the way they are managed and cared for. Even though we've had success over the last 20 years in marine park management, we're also facing some challenges. Climate change is a threat to our oceans, and this comes in the form of warming oceans, rising sea levels, and changing wind patterns and currents. We also have key threats to manage. This includes things like marine invasive species and even some of our native species becoming pests, as well as poor water quality and illegal fishing. We also need resources to maintain and improve the parks. These systems cover a huge area. We need help to monitor and care for these distinct places. Our coasts are incredible. I still remember my first time diving in Victoria and was just blown away by the diversity of life. What we're doing is essential. We're really making a huge difference to the ecosystems here, and as Victorians, we should be proud to have led the way in protecting these unique underwater worlds. In 2 decades, we've seen so much growth, and our fieldwork and research is showing us just how much is at stake. In the face of new challenges and climate change, there's still more work to be done to ensure that these delicate ecosystems survive. Not just because these places offer us somewhere to enjoy, or because they contribute to a healthy environment, but because they are important. They are beautiful and rare and full of life.
That was a wonderful, I hope, overview of essentially what the marine protected areas are all about, what we've actually been able to do with your support, with the community support in terms of building this world-class and representative system of marine protected areas that extend from one end of the state to the other. As Tess talked about in the video, these places are obviously incredibly important for biodiversity. They are essentially the jewels in the crown of our coastline that protect, in exactly the same way our national park system does, some jewels of our terrestrial environments, our alpine environments, the East Gippsland area, Wilson's Promontory, the Grampians, up on the Murray. Our protected areas in the sea play that same role in our underwater environments. But equally, they're important places for people as well. You know, you've seen some of the involvement of volunteers, in particular through Mike's discussion around what the Friends of Beware Reef have been doing to support and particularly establish, I guess, in the first instance, the sanctuary there. But for the more broader community, now these are great places to come and enjoy. Yes, you must leave the fishing rod in the car, the spear gun perhaps better at home, but in terms of actually enjoying these areas, they provide so many opportunities for people to just simply enjoy nature, to get in the water and snorkel or dive, to maybe sit on the top either in a boat or in a kayak or at a surf ski, whatever it might be. They're places basically for photographers, they're places for artists, they're places for us to contemplate what life is like actually without extraction under the water. And we've really seen some remarkable changes occurring in terms of the biodiversity. You might, for some of you interested more in the biodiversity changes, just jump back to one of our early webinars with Dr. Michael Sams from the September biodiversity webinar, and you'll be able to find out a lot more there. So thank you very much for joining us. Michael, if I can get you to just turn your microphone on, are there any questions that have come through at this stage, if you wouldn't mind just giving me the voice of God?
We have a couple, but everyone please pop your questions or comments in your chat while we've still got time. But so one came through from Utah saying, how would one go about getting under the water with Monique? So I guess how do we get involved in our ranges?
Look, I did see that question. I did have a little bit of a sly grin on that one. Yeah, getting in the water with Monique would have been a lot easier a couple of years ago when she didn't work for Parks Victoria. Monique came to us from a dolphin swim business down in Queenscliff called Seawall Dolphin Swims. Her experience in that space is extraordinary. So look, unfortunately, unless you're doing one of our community dives, there's actually a couple of Great Victorian Fish Count events that Mon will be definitely involved in coming up in late November, early December. That's probably the best opportunity to get in the water with Mon. But more broadly, there are a bunch of people who run tourism businesses across Victoria, places like Queenscliff, like Sorrento, up further north in the Bay, and even some of our regional centres also have dive shops and places where you can actually join in with an organised tour. What we suggest, if you're actually looking for opportunities to do that, is jump onto our website and you should be able to find some of the local tour operators that can take you out and into the water in some of these parks. Any other questions come up, Michael? Because there's a couple of I've noted down for our two ranges online tonight. Is there any other questions that you can see at the moment?
There's not a lot coming through, so you can throw to your questions.
All right, excellent. All right, well, I'm going to put you on the spot, Maggie. I'm going to send you on the spotlight, stick you up on the screen there. And my question to you is, what's your favourite underwater experience while you've been working with Parks Victoria? And just tell us how long you've actually been working with PV for.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. So I'm a relative newbie to Parks Victoria. I was lucky enough to come down from Mike's Way up in East Gippsland, but I came down to South Gippsland almost a year ago, just off my 1-year anniversary. So I began my position as a marine ranger, and then did some time at Tidal River as a terrestrial ranger, and now I'm back in the marine ranger role, which is really exciting. Look, to come to hand, it's a bit hard to choose. Every day that I'm on the water and underneath the water is a really incredible and special time. One particular one that pops to mind actually is a recent rapid health assessment that we completed around Benison Island. It was just on snorkel, but we were very lucky in the water temperature had warmed up significantly, which is very nice for Corner Inlet especially. And just we had a real array of fish species and invertebrates, and it was just a fantastic day out underwater, and I think it really enlivened that passion again, and makes me really excited for the months to come and getting out and exploring more of those areas.
Fantastic, thanks, Maggie. What about you, Mike? You've been 20 years on the job in terms of looking at Beware Reef. You've probably spent more time underwater at Beware Reef than most people, with perhaps the exception of Don and John, etc. What was one of your best experiences over the years? And don't tell us the Great White story, because you weren't there.
I wasn't there. God, I think I would have loved to have been there, but in some ways I'm sort of glad I wasn't. But it was an amazing experience for them. I think what I've done over the years is, once I sort of got to know the underwater world at Beware Reef reasonably well myself, the best experiences for me, I remember there was, it's been a couple of times, but one in particular, we had a real, what we call a blue water day, where the clarity is amazing. Like generally it's reasonably good out at Beware Reef. People think of diving in Victoria as dark and grey and cold, and you can't see anything. Well, it's cold, but it is clear and very colourful a lot of the time. But we had one of those blue water days, and you could just see like 30 metres plus and I was taking down a group of people on a dive, parks staff and some volunteers as well, and showing them around the Auckland Rec site and showing them some of the amazing diversity and sponge gardens and all the rest of it. And the dive was awesome, was incredible. But my favourite part of it was actually coming up to the surface and hearing their reaction to the dive and what they just experienced, and they're just like, oh, because but for all of them it was pretty much the first time they've ever dived at Beware Reef, and a lot of them the first time they dived in Victoria, and just going, that like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It was just to hear them going nuts and saying how incredible it was. I got a big buzz out of that. So yeah,
fantastic, great to hear, Mike. And again, every day in the office, the blue office, is a pretty good day, basically, isn't it? Terrific. Yep. Back to you now, Maggie, with a follow-up question. What's the biggest challenge that you think your park, the Bussells Prom or the Corner Inlet area, is facing at the moment?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. Look, I think our marine park challenges are, I guess, universal to a lot of other parks. I think one particular one for the Wilson's Prom Marine National Park particularly is the barrier to our communities being able to actually get out and experience the park itself, especially the underwater side of the park. It is remote in many senses, although we have an incredible amount of visitors getting to experience the coastal areas of our marine national park. The percentage who actually get to either get out on vessels or who are lucky enough to get in the water diving or snorkeling and seeing those habitats and those ecosystems is a lot smaller percentage, and I think it's really important as we move forward to create that picture for them and create that understanding of what is actually out there, because once you do that, then I think wanting to protect those environments comes hand in hand with that. So I think getting as part of that messaging moving forward is to get as many people to experience those incredible areas and grow that appreciation for them. So it's always front of mind for the community.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. That challenge of underwater, it's a lot easier to see an alpine area or a desert environment or a forest and appreciate it. Again, the underwater world is quite difficult, as you're saying, to get into. Yeah. So again, the work that the tour operators do in terms of supporting people visiting and accessing parks is incredible. But there's also the other side of it, which is what we're trying to do through events like today, through our imagery, through our online materials and through our publications, and the visitor centre, the great little visitor centre at Tidal River, providing opportunities for people to connect to the park. Most Victorians are not scuba divers and will never be scuba divers. So one of our challenges that Maggie's really talking about here is how do we connect people with a place that they can't see and are fairly unlikely, in most cases, to get under. So yeah, really important we continue to do that. What about in your case, Mike? I mean, you've got some other challenges up. You spoke briefly about the urchins issue. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing Beware Reef Marine Sanctuary at the moment?
Yeah, I think probably the same as most of our, not only our Victorian marine areas, but also around Australia and overseas is climate change. The urchins, that one of the main reasons that they are overpopulated and have cleaned out the kelp forests from not only bits of Victoria, but New South Wales and as far as Tassie and all that as well is because the water's warming up, and it doesn't have to warm up by much to have a big impact. I think, like Maggie said, getting people involved, and I've mentioned Don and John and Elle, who sort of are the founders of Friends of Beware Reef, but we have some new up and comers as part of Friends of Beware Reef, and there are other volunteer agencies out there, and you don't have to dive to be involved in marine protected areas. There's plenty of things to do and get involved with and help with. Although diving's great, diving and snorkeling, you don't have to be, you can be scared of the water and still contribute and help out with our marine protected areas and everything that's involved in those. So just encourage people. I noticed there were a few questions on how do you become a marine ranger and how do we, go diving with you guys and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think volunteering your time and learning and helping is a really good start, and then build from there.
Right, thank you so much, Mike, and thanks, Maggie, for responding to those questions. I'm just looking at the clock now and realise that it's ticked over in terms of we're all supposed to turn into pumpkins about now, so we better get out of here. I just want to, again, just before closing, just say again a huge thank you, not only to Mike and to Maggie for their contributions tonight, but for the work they do every day they go to work. And not only Mike and Maggie, obviously Monique, Jack, we talked about earlier on, Tess, Michael sitting behind the scenes here. We've got a bunch of incredible people who work in Parks Victoria who do see the marine environment and the marine protected areas that we're responsible for as a really important part of their work. And, you know, huge kudos to what they do. When these parks came into being back in 2002, there wasn't a recipe book, there wasn't an instruction manual that came with it. It's a bit like getting a first child. You don't really know what you're going to be doing next. So there was a lot of basically trial and error. They were trying to learn from the best overseas, in other places, other parts of Australia, and really build a world-class park system. We've made some mistakes along the way, and again, those of you who've been watching this space closely will be aware of some of the, you know, the constraints that have been imposed in terms of budgets and things like that. But I think the important thing for today, and in particular for our 20 years to reflect on, is the enormous contribution that not only our staff have made, we've got a wonderful bunch of agencies that support the work that Parks Victoria do. I'll shout out particularly to the Victorian Fisheries Authority, or the VFA, who take a very active role in working with us in the compliance space, ensuring that these highly protected areas are protected, and if people want to go out there and do the wrong thing, that there is some consequences for that. DELP, the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, have provided with some funding for a range of different initiatives, including particularly our marine pest initiatives. We work with many other agencies, the EPA, the Commissioner for Environmental Sustainability, the Department of Agriculture, which is responsible for biosecurity, and many others as well, who really do help us a lot in our work. And the last group of people I want to thank is people like yourselves who are listening today, our volunteers, our communities, the people who are passionate about protecting some parts of Victoria's incredible underwater environment for the future. We're really fortunate to arrive here 20 years later and actually have a park system that's actually functional, that's actually showing very clear evidence of improvement. We've actually got demonstrated evidence of that. Michael's put a couple of comments in the chat in response to the question about what is the monitoring shown, and giving you some links to both his webinar from back in September as well as to some of the reports that are coming out at the moment. We really have come a long way over that 20 years. So I just want to say thanks very much to everybody who's been involved, whether it's our park staff, our partners in other agencies in local government, and most importantly, our partners in the community, our different volunteer groups and people who just care about the underwater environment. You are the ones who actually this park system is actually for. So thank you so much for your contributions. We hope you've enjoyed the session this evening. If you want to know more, Michael's also posted up a link, and I'll be certainly sending out, once we've got the recording of this tonight's session, just a bit of follow-up information, including a link to our landing page on the Parks Victoria's ParkWeb. Again, if you jump onto anything on ParkWeb, one of the scrolling through images will come up is about our 10th anniversary. So join and connecting with some of the other things we've done previously. There's some great interactive maps where you can go and explore individual parks, get more details about what you can actually do once you get there. So please do go and have a look at what other resources we're providing. I just want to quick plug for next month. As I mentioned at the beginning, next month you'll be able to see a little bit more of Tess. Tess is actually going to be running a presentation for us looking at the opportunities to get wet. In other words, discovering the different ways that we can actually enjoy our marine protected areas, and a great lead into summer and some inspiration hopefully for many of you to get out and visit us in the parks, as Mon said. So, thank you again, particularly Maggie, Mike, for being here online tonight. Thank you again for the others who contributed their video, Monique, Jack and to Tess. Thank you, Michael, for your hosting in the background there. But thank you all for joining us, and most important thing to say today, happy birthday, 20 years, Victoria's Marine National Parks. Let's have another 20 more and lots more things to look forward to. See you later, guys. Bye for now.